So I hope you had a good go at this practical yourself, and now you're ready to take a look at this lecture and see how I went about solving the practical. So let's look at how we can turn this basic HTML page into something like this, where we can add a few more interesting things, let's say. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is just add in a few of the basic stuff. So we've got the H1 here. This looks like some kind of H3, a smaller header, possibly even a H4. And I think that's just explaining what to do. So just, enter your name, password, and how much you'd like to withdraw. Please add your name, password, and amount to withdraw. And then afterwards, I'm going to create a basic form. We can ignore all this stuff in order to put in the name, the password, and their amount. So let's put in name. Let's first of all put in a paragraph saying name. Then after that, let's put in our input. Type equals text. That's great. And then let's put in the ID that we want. Well, we'll do that in a second. Let's get the basics going first, eh? So first of all, we have this. We have one more. And then we want to have one more input, don't we? Okay, fantastic. Then after that, we're going to put in a button. And we want to make sure that we have a function in a second, but for now this will do, saying withdraw. Okay. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Except we don't want to have name repeated all that many times. So let's go for password. And then let's go for amount. Great, so I think the next thing we want to do, because obviously eventually we want to be able to get the values from here, make sure that these two are the same as whatever we want them to be, and then we want to have an amount to put in. So that's a lot of stuff to think of straight off the bat. I think the first thing we should just focus on is, can we get these values? And the best way to test that is essentially, just in our JavaScript, is to somehow find a way to get the values out of here. So the first thing to do is to essentially decide that on this button we're going to call a function. So within this button tag I'm going to put the onClick. There we go. And then let's call this, let's just call this the withdraw. And then we'll put some parentheses around those. Okay, so now let's set about actually writing out the function here. So it's the withdraw function. So within here, let's start off by getting the values, and just so we can test it, let's like set up an alert or something. So the first thing I want to do is get the var name. So the way that we do that, as you may remember, is we do document.getElementById, and the ID is, I believe it's just called, oh, we haven't created IDs yet, so let's just do that. ID equals name form. And the second one, let's give it an ID of password form, so pass form. And then finally, for the amount, let's give another ID equals amount form. Okay, so now let's get them here. So name form, and then dot value. And that's how we get the value from the form. So let's do that 3 times. So this one's going to be password. I'm actually going to change these. I'm going to call this name attempt. That makes more sense because they're attempting to use them. So password attempt, and then amount. And we'll just call it attempts just because it fits in well with all these. Change these IDs. So this is password attempt. No, pass form. And this one should be amount form. And then let's just alert on all of these. Just with a really basic alert that's just name attempt plus password attempt plus amount attempt. So let's just give that a try, make sure it's working. My name, my pass, large number. So when we try that, that's not currently working. So let's have a look. The function should be withdraw. So I know we'll do Control-Shift-I and we'll look right into the developer's console. Oh, I see. It's the age-old typo. So as you can see here, the JavaScript files beginner with 1G and 2 N's. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go for name, password, and some money. Okay, so that's picking it all up. It's nothing fancy, but we're getting what we need. Great. So now let's get started on actually solving the problem of, next thing is to see, right, the person needs to enter the correct name and the correct password. So what we want to do is let's create the correct ones we want. So let's go for correct name equal to, let's just go for John Harper, and then the correct password is equal to, let's go for John1234, the most secure one ever. And then let's add in correct. Let's go for current balance. Let's go for 500. So you may be thinking, well, in real life when there's a bank, they can't just hard code this stuff in, right? So that's where databases come into use, and we'll be talking about those later on in the course. So for now you can consider these as placeholders, but of course in the future there'll be good ways in which JavaScript can actually can access the correct values from a database. So don't worry about that too much for now. So what we've got here are the correct name, correct password, and correct balance. And now we've gotten all the attempts here. So what we can do is we can start looking at, right, the first thing we want to do is make sure that the name and the password are correct. So if you are working on this yourself, you may have thought this is the perfect time to use if statements. So we can say if the correct name is, we could say if it's the same, if it's equal to the name attempt, so we can say if it's correct. What it might be better to do is to say if, and I'm going to switch those around because it just reads better, if the name attempt is not equal to the correct name, then what do we want to do? Well, let's alert, saying, and actually what I'd quite like to do is, instead of it appearing as an alert at the top, I'd actually quite like for it to appear down at the bottom. So I'm just going to have a H4 here with an ID of feedback. I'm going to leave it empty for now. So that instead of alerting, I'm just going to go document dot get element by ID feedback inner HTML. So I'm going to have a message appear saying incorrect name. Try again. Okay. Then we're going to say, well, there are a lot of other things that could happen. So let's look at else if. So else if the password attempt is not equal to the correct password. And then we want something similar to happen, so we can just copy and paste this in here. Just change that to password. Try again. So let's go for this. Let's put in the correct name. We're going to put in the wrong password. Okay, so that's not yet working. So let's have a look. We'll go for Control-Shift-I. Let's get into the habit of using this tool. So withdraw is not defined. So I'm pretty sure that we want to be looking at this top one here, uncaught syntax error, unexpected identifier. So if I click into here, it will show me exactly where it's talking about. So let's try again. Let's look for this unexpected identifier. So it's saying it's here. If name is not equal to correct name. Well, that's very easy to correct now. So essentially it's just missing those brackets we were talking about before. We need to include that in the condition. So now I can close this, refresh the page. So we'll go for John Harper for the correct name. We'll put an incorrect password. Let's put in an amount. incorrect password, try again. Fantastic. Let's try it the other way around. So put in an incorrect name, the right password, John1234. Incorrect name, try again. Brilliant. So now let's go for the balance. So we want to say if someone's trying to so at this point they would have gotten the name correct and the password correct, but let's say they want to withdraw more than they have. So we can say else if, then in brackets, else if let's say the amount attempt is more than the current balance. Then what we want to do, give some more feedback again, saying insufficient funds. Okay, so are there any other things that we can think of? Let's see, if you get the name wrong, the password wrong, or you withdraw too much. So that sounds about right for this beginner's bank. The last thing we want to do is say, well, so else, which is basically saying if none of this has happened. So that means that the name attempt is correct, the password attempt is correct, and the amount attempt isn't more than the current balance. Else, so let's do this, we can just say for now, let's go for something like withdraw success. So let's give that a try. Let's see if we can meet all the conditions, which are John Harper. So that's the correct name is going to be the same as the name attempt. Let's put in the correct password. And let's put in something that's less than 500, so 49. Withdraw success. Great. Let's just add to this a little bit and say your funds are now. And then we need to do a calculation, don't we? So we need to do essentially the current balance minus the amount attempt. So let's create another variable just here. So var new balance equals, let's see, current balance minus the amount attempt. Now, of course, instead of putting current balance here, I could have put 50, but sorry, 500. But then what if we had to change this number up above? Then it would have all messed up. And that's why it's so helpful to use the variables whenever you can. So now all we have to do here, we can just add that onto the end. So we add in, what do we call it? New balance. Okay, so let's give this a try. So the correct name, correct password, and let's go for 10. Excellent. So withdrawal success, your funds are now 490. And so that's about it for our beginner's bank. So I hope that made sense to you. Essentially, what we've been focusing on, the really important takeaways are that you can use this dot value when you're using getElementById. And that's when, in a form, you have the inputs. So you give them an ID, you get that ID using getElementById, and then dot value, you can get whatever the user has put in. And then we've basically been looking at how we can then use that information using if and else statements to then start doing some cool stuff like looking if the password's correct, making sure they're not withdrawing too much. So we're just getting a bit deeper into how we can use all these things that we're learning to actually have some practical applications. So I hope that made sense to you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.